Dave and I go through our recent photos. There's an update on the merchandise situation, and I recently had the pleasure to interview Jo Bradford, where we talked about her photography as well as her books. All this coming up on the iPhoneography podcast. It's Monday, March 28th, and this is the iPhoneography podcast. My name is Greg McMillan, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host and friend, Dave Podner. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Greg, how's it going?
It's going not too bad at all. Okay, so this show, it's going to be kind of split into two pieces here because we're going to talk about a couple things, and then we're going to go to an interview that I had with Jo Bradford. She's an author of a couple of books on mobile photography and one on Snapseed, and it's a pretty darn good interview. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up here shortly. But first of all, you're going to notice a quick change for me, not only in the color of the lights behind me, but with the shirt that I'm wearing. And this is a one-of-a-kind shirt because it was when I first started our merchandise thing. This is what we're going to do is we're going to give an update on the merchandise. So when I first started with the merchandise, this is the logo that I wanted to use, and I submitted. And the company that does the merchandise, Cafe Press, won't print it. Now this one snuck through, and the coffee mug that Shane Mawson got snuck through, but that's it. Everything else got shut down because it has the word iPhone in it. And that's the reason they won't print it, is because the word iPhone, it's part of iPhoneography. I can get myself straight here. Part of the word iPhoneography, even though you can use the word like that for the name of this podcast, the name of the website, iPhoneography.ca, all this stuff. My own personal website, shot on iPhone only, it has the word iPhone in it. All these things seem to be okay. But the company can't print it because if you, and I had to do this, I had to go look up the terms and copyright stuff and all that stuff on Apple's website about this stuff. And they can't do it. They're not allowed to. They're not allowed to print something with the word iPhone in it. Same with Mac and all that stuff, and iPod and iPad. They're very strict on how those things are used, and printing them on merchandise to sell to make money on them is not allowed. So I guess that's why it's okay in a show title, because it's not being sold to make money. But so now there is a new logo design, and I'm going to pull up the website here and show what this stuff looks like. And I'm not happy with the logo, but I don't have much choice. It's rather plain and mundane as far as I'm concerned, and try to get this a little bigger. So, there's all different kinds of stuff that you can get here, and different colors and all that stuff. But as you can see, the logo itself is just a generic looking phone with a microphone inside it, kind of like the other logo, like the one that David Addison come up with for us, and that I kind of changed around a little bit and all that stuff. So it's kind of representative of what we do as a iPhoneography podcast, but it's not very clear. Like, if you wore this thing down the street, somebody would probably wonder what the heck is that. But who knows? Maybe it's good for a conversation starter. But there's the coffee mugs, cases for just about any kind of phone. I think any kind of iPhone. You got slim, tough, and I don't know, a couple other different kinds of cases, and then like a beer mug or a drinking glass. So there's the logo. There's what it looks like, and these are what they will probably look like on these products. And these are in Canadian dollars on this site, but if you go to the site in your country, wherever you are, it'll show there's 7 or 8 different currencies that are available. And you can change your currency here. So if I want to look at this okay, there's 5. So if I wanted to look at this in US dollars, there's the prices there in US. So not overly pleased with the fact that I had to change the logo like that, but it is what it is. And there's lots of different colors. This is the one I have right here, the men's polo golf shirt. And this particular one is only available in white, but there's other ones that are different colors. So you got dark blue, light blue, black, navy, and gray. And then with the women's stuff, there's more colors available. And so it's just something I thought we'd try to do to help support the show. And there it is. So that's basically the update on it. And again, it's too bad we couldn't get them like this, because this is pretty cool, I think. And even the phone here is actually like an iPhone, and I have a feeling that probably wouldn't fly either, even if I try to change it.
Too close. Yeah, too close.
But I don't know. It's a shame that it has to be this way, but it is what it is. I even thought of getting it done locally here and shipping them out so that I can get this done. It would be like a private person doing this logo, but Dave, my common sense brought to my attention that the shipping costs would be astronomical, and it just wouldn't make sense. So we're pretty well stuck with it the way it is. So that's all there is about that. So now we are going to look at some of our recent photos. And Dave, we'll start with you again.
Okay.
Now, I numbered them in the order that they were in the message that you sent. Is that all right?
Nope, that's fine. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I will share my screen again. And again, audio listeners, this is going to be on YouTube, this week's show. So look for it there. And but if you're not on YouTube and you're just listening, you'll be able to see these pictures on your device, hopefully, as usual. So this one looks pretty cool, Dave.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Rick. Yeah, this one was actually, I was just going on a walk and there was a track nearby. I wasn't walking down the railroad tracks. I do not suggest, because I could tell by the look of these tracks, they are well maintained and these are active. So I was very careful that there was a good amount of distance. I didn't want a train sneaking up on me and getting too close. It was, it's as Matt Hoffman called it, stick season still.
Yeah.
But it was warm enough that we didn't have any snow. So it was just kind of brown and sticky. But I did a little edit in Polar. And I used the fringing. So that's kind of the separation of color look to it there.
Yeah, I wondered how you did that.
Yeah, so you can it's just a slider bar in there, so you can, if you really want to mess with your eyes, you can really get it off and it starts to really separate.
Yeah.
Almost to the point of, if any of the olds are out there like us, if you remember the old 3D glasses with the red and green where they're really separated the colors, you can get them pretty close to that. So this is just a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So it just has that kind of, to me, just because of the way it looked and how brown everything was and the sky was real overcast, just gave an old look to it. So I did the photo editing itself, like I said, in Polar. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you got some interesting things going on with this one too, because you've got leading lines with the track, and then you've got basically the rule of thirds with the horizon line, as hidden as it is in all the shrubs and brushes and
Yeah.
stuff. And you could almost say you got that, what do they call that composition thing where you come around like this, and then you
Oh, yeah. Like it's a spiral composition.
yeah,
I
I
forget
can
as
never
what it's
remember the
called.
name of that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it almost looks like you got that going on, because your eyes follow the tracks and then come up and around to the sky and into the trees, and then follow those hydro lines, and then basically converge on either the pole or on those trees that are in the middle.
Right.
So
Right.
it works good.
And thank you. And the well, one last thing on that, or one. I went into, because the border in Polar are just simple. It's just a simple border and color. But Camera Plus 2 has a lot of border options. So I then threw it in Camera Plus 2 to give it the old time photograph with the little on the corners, the old time holders that you would see like in an old photo album look to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the nice thing
that's
is
a
it
nice
does shrink
treatment.
it down. Yeah, it just shrinks it down so it doesn't cut off any of the photo.
Oh yeah, okay.
So that I think
Yeah.
that worked out pretty good that way.
And the border suits the concept.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like I
Right.
said, it is nice what you can do in Camera Plus 2 with the borders. They have different borders. They have like film borders, some of the older ones. So I do use that as a fallback for like borders and some other filters. It's not my main go-to anymore. It used to be, but it does have some nice touches that I'm sure you can find this other places. It's just that I know where it is, I know how to use it, and I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a handy thing to do, is to do what you're comfortable with, and
Exactly.
it makes your workflow not
Mhm.
only easier but faster.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. This one looks wild.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
this is a pole art product, I'm betting.
It partially. I'll say this
Okay.
partially. This was a race I had over the weekend. This is a county park, and this is the boathouse. So on the other side of this is a man-made lake.
Oh, okay.
And this is kind of one of the. This is actually three things I did editing it. First thing, just to the right of the door there were some trash cans I used touch retouch to get rid of.
Oh, okay.
It's really hard to tell, but it just looks a little messy there on the bottom right, just to the right of the door. I took it away, but I didn't think it stuck out too much. I think the garbage cans would have stuck out more. The sky, because it was overcast and cloudy, it just didn't turn out good. So I used PS camera to replace the sky.
Oh, okay.
So it is PS camera is very limited. It's not full blown Photoshop. It is put out by Adobe though, that the PS being Photoshop camera, but it can do sky replacements very, very well.
Yeah.
And it gives you a bunch of options. Now, when that was done, it made it very dark because it's supposed to be a night scene. It made it overly dark. So then I threw it in Polar to adjust it, lighten it up, and make it pop a little bit more. So it was kind of a 3-step process there.
So was it given in like an HDR treatment too?
Kind of. I would say kind of. It's not HDR on purpose, but just the filter that the PS camera put on to lighten it gave it kind of, to just lighten it up, kind of gave it that HDR. So there wasn't a specific I hit HDR. It's just the way that it came out for everything to be light enough to see. Made it very HDR like.
Oh yeah.
Also, I wanted to emphasize a lot of the texture on the building itself, because it is that rough hewed stone. The building itself. It's an old building. It is a really old building. So it has that, castle almost look to it.
Now those stones that go around, like that form the arc at the top and then come down the other side, are they pointed inwards towards the doors?
Yeah. It actually is not a lot, just a little bit, but yeah, they're not flat. They're not flat.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's kind
Yeah.
of the
So it's not a
archway
figment
going
of my
in.
imagination.
No, because if you look at the very bottom,
Yeah,
you
you
can
can see
see
it.
the step up there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty cool building.
Oh yeah. 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 And that's
Man,
a
you got
common area for start and finish places. And that's a nice the park. It's called very, and of course they get very imaginative with the naming North Park because it's
oh,
north of the city.
right.
But it has the lake, so you can rent boats and things like that. And there's a 5 mile trail around the lake itself.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then there's well, I should say trail as in there's a road around that has a place where you can bike and walk on the edge.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that'd be
it's
neat.
kind of a trail. It's more of a walking path, but then they do
Yeah.
have trails on the side of the hill, literally on the side of the freaking hill that you can walk up and down too.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a nice big area out in it's still in the county, so it's not too far out. And of course,
Mhm.
we also have in the south part of the county, we have South Park. Again, very imaginative.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we do have parks to the east and west, and they actually gave them really real names. Like the one in the west is Settler's Cabin,
Oh, yeah.
and the one in the east is Boyce. So it's actually named after someone.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know why they decide to name 2 of the 4 parks and not all 4.
Yeah.
Politics probably, but
Yeah. Could be. Yeah. Well, that's cool. And now,
okay.
there we go.
Yep.
Couldn't get my
And
button to
this
work.
oh no problem. Now this last one I just took today. Just going for a walk. And this was a little on the tricky side because this was trying to use the built-in macro capability of the iPhone 13
Mhm.
Pro. And not only was it a little bit windy, so of course things moving around, but just as I was getting close enough to get it in focus, it switched lens.
Oh,
So I had to back up, go forward, back up, go forward, back, just trying to play with it. And as we were talking beforehand, it was cold here today, and windy. So here I am trying to hold it up, going back and forth, trying to. Luckily, I had gloves that were touch sensitive, so was
yeah.
able to keep my glove on. But it was a bit cold trying to get this photo. That's
Mhm.
also why it wasn't as sharp as you see others for macro. Like I said, it was having trouble because outside of the branches and the buds coming out, there really wasn't anything else around that close area.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
just such of a small area to try to focus on. I think it was having trouble with it.
And those buds look like they're really trying to bloom.
Yeah, we're like I said, I think a lot of people right now in the northeast part are swinging between frozen snow and really warm temperatures, and then back cold, and extreme
Yeah.
swings to the
Oh,
point
yeah.
of it's like, okay, hopefully the plants don't start to bloom and then all of a sudden get coated with enough snow to kill them off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And it's a wonder you didn't get this with actual frost on it or something. That would have been just the icing on the
Yeah.
cake right there for the weather we're having.
Well, today was below freezing the whole day. Overnight's going to be below freezing, then we're going to be above freezing tomorrow. And I think that hopefully this is it, because we're getting near April. We're not normally below freezing in April. We're not normally below freezing in April. Or it's rare. I should say it's rare.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't quite cold enough, long enough for frost. And I think this was taking, I'm trying to remember what time. It was late afternoon. I'm sorry, late morning. So
Right.
any frost, I don't think it would have stayed because the sun was coming in and out. It wasn't
Mhm.
completely overcast. So yeah, and also I just like the natural bokeh look too.
Yeah, just took the words out of my mouth. I was just going to comment
Okay.
on that. The nice bokeh in the background.
Yep.
It's does a nice job of picking that up. So, well, sooner or later these things are going to be flowers, and you'll be able to get some nice macros of that.
Oh yeah, most
Yeah.
definitely.
Alrighty. Okay, so those are Dave's. Now I'll bring mine up. And here we are. So I was out for a walk. And this is only like this is a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. We still had, this kind of snow. And we lost it all, and now it looks like this again. And it's maddening. But anyway, this was at a near a local, excuse me, a local favorite waterfall of mine, and I took the dog for a walk through the woods. There's a trail that goes right along this river that leads up to the falls, and so that bridge is on the other side, obviously, of the river, and it kind of goes up through the woods and whatnot, and that little part that goes under the bridge just goes over into kind of a marshland type of area. So I put my reflex 60 millimeter on the telephoto camera and took this shot with it, and really not much done to the image other than a slight vignette and maybe a little bit of contrast or something. But I was kind of happy with the way the phone took the picture as it was. So
was the wind kicking up a little bit there? Because I'm looking at the water in the foreground. I'm seeing some peaks going on there.
Well, the water was running pretty good. It was rushing pretty
Okay.
good. It was kind of breezy, yeah, not overly windy though. But I was kind of sheltered in the trees and just took this through an opening, so I wasn't freezing too badly.
Right.
And then this one, now Matt Hoffman calls it stick season. This time of year and late fall, between the fall foliage and the time the snow comes, that's stick season as well. This is Snirt season.
Okay.
Snow and dirt.
Okay.
Yeah. A friend of mine put a picture on his Flickr page, and it was something like this. It was, or no, sorry, he commented on someone's photo where they had a picture of a beach, kind of like this, but with just sand and everything else. But it was snow covered and dirt everywhere. And he commented on it that it was Snirt, and I had to get a real chuckle out of that. So, and then he explained that Snirt season is when you have snow and dirt. And every time I say it, I almost laugh because it's kind of funny. But it's exactly what it is. It's like snow and dirt. It's just a dirty time of year, and we call it Snirt. So this was over in a little town on the Lake Huron shoreline called Southampton, and right to the right, you'll see that water coming in. That's heading into the river that heads inland there, and this is a like a marker with a flashing red light on it. I don't know if it was flashing or not, but this is just to let the boats know where they are, type of thing, and the rocks going into it. So I just thought it was kind of a neat composition with the Snirt and then the dull sky. All I did with this is crop it to 16:9.
Okay. Yeah, I like the curve of the rocks there. It almost gives you like a feeling for like a hook.
Yeah. And kind of, I don't know, like looking at this just now, I'm thinking kind of a sense of depth, maybe, like distance that thing is away. I'm not sure how far away it was, but I mean, you could easily walk out to it on these rocks, but
okay.
I wouldn't want to do it because I'd probably sprain my ankle again. So that's Snirt season. And then this was actually the same day. I just turned to the right a little bit. The first one was with my telephoto camera with no lens on it. This one is with the telephoto camera with the reflex lens on it, because this is a fair bit away across the river. And I just thought it was interesting how beat up this lighthouse is. Shingles missing, like the wind can be very vicious over there at times. And I imagine that's probably what happened to this place, because the last time I saw this lighthouse, I don't remember seeing it that beat up.
Right.
So I'm hoping they do some repairs to it over the
Yep.
summer. But
Ooh.
it's a popular tourist attraction too, because a lot of people take pictures of that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because you can see the door right in the door. The door almost looks like one of those emergency hit here for glass doors,
Yeah.
because you don't have a scale for, oh, that is actually, big enough for a person to get into.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing you can see really is there's a ladder by the door. Um, yeah. Other than that, sense of scale is hard to determine, because that railing at the top, around the top of the lighthouse, you'd almost think, well, maybe that's just waist high, but no, that's probably, I'll bet you that's a good 6 feet high.
Right.
So, and then of course there's the Snirt on the shore over there.
I imagine that does help though, because it is not just blinding white snow too. So the contrast probably goes down a little bit, having the dirt mixed in there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And the picture that my friend commented on when he called it Snirt, it was actually a very nice photo. It was a different beach, a different part of the shoreline, and the way the sand and the dirt had wisped across the snow, it made nice kind of cool looking patterns and stuff.
Okay.
So it was kind of interesting to an interesting take on this time of year. So when you think it's so bland and blah, it actually made it look interesting. So yeah, so that's our pictures, and we're not going to have a tip this week. We're going to skip that because between what we've just done now with talking about the merchandise and our recent photos, we're now going to get on to the interview with Joe Bradford, and it's about 40 minutes long. And again, this is on YouTube. So during the interview, there will be some of her pictures playing on the screen and whatnot. And she's going to talk about her books and, what she's got on the go. And it was just a real treat to talk to her. And unfortunately, she's dealing with COVID right now. She was supposed to go to some event in the near future here. Oh no, I know what it was. She's going to talk about running, because she's another runner, Dave. And
okay.
she was going to do a marathon, and now she can't, and it's really upsetting her. So
no.
Keep her in your thoughts when you think about her, and I'm sure she'll recover. And but yeah, when she gets better, she'll get back into the running again. But no, she's a great gal. And so without further ado, here's the interview. And here I am with Joe Bradford, and this lady here is a best-selling author. She's won awards with her photography, developed and taught workshops and courses. She's been interviewed on TV and radio, and some of her images have been used by a long list of well-known clients. Joe, you're a busy lady. How are you, Joe Bradford?
I'm really well, thank you, and thanks for that lovely introduction.
Well, I don't know how you have time to eat with all the stuff that you have on the go.
I tend to eat at my desk a lot of the time. I spend my spare time training for a marathon. I'm running a marathon in 2 weeks' time, my 5th one. So I like to think that I spend my time doing lots of different varied things, but photography is definitely my passion.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna get into some Q&A here. Now, as everyone knows, you've been on the Mobiography podcast, and you've had an interview with Mike James. So we're going to try to get a little fresh content here for the listeners and viewers. This one's going to be on YouTube. And so I'm going to start with, how did you get started with Snapseed? I mean, you've talked about how you got started in photography and all that stuff, but with Snapseed itself, how did you discover it?
So when I first started taking pictures with a phone, because I come from a digital photography background and an editorial photography background, I was always very accustomed to shooting raw photographs and then processing them in Photoshop or Affinity Photo or something like that afterwards. And so it was part of my workflow to shoot and then edit, and I would always kind of underexpose the skies and bring out the foregrounds. And so pretty much from the outset of starting to shoot with a phone, I was always interested in what else I could do with the photos. So there was a little period where I would do some of my editing just in Instagram or in iPhone's native app, because it was just so useful to have it all there. And then I stumbled across Snapseed because I saw someone talking about Nick software, and they'd developed it originally, and thought it was really interesting to hear the story about how it had been sold to Google, but on the proviso that it was not allowed to be charged for at any time. And I thought they sounded like good people. So I downloaded the app and checked it out, and I've literally been in love with it ever since. It's such a cool, powerful little app.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I've had it since Nick had it, so I had to buy it.
Yeah.
It was like $4.99 Canadian, I think. So it definitely is a powerful editing suite for sure. Now you mentioned that you use Affinity Photo. Do you integrate your workflows with, between Snapseed and Affinity?
I do, yeah. So I quite often do a really basic edit with with Snapseed. And the reason why I like to start there is because I have a set workflow in my mind, and I always kind of run through the same set of stages of the workflow. Sometimes though, if I'm going to be switching over to working on my iPad, I'll have a tendency to switch back and forth between some things on Snapseed and a few extra things on Affinity. Like I like to go to Affinity for, it's got really amazing noise reduction, and there's little special parts of it that I just think are, best in class, really. So, but on the whole, most of it can be done quite happily on either my iPhone or my iPad on a Snapseed, and I'll happily walk away feeling like I've done a good edit. And in fact, earlier today, I was looking at some images for a client and thinking, I shouldn't have done these on my desktop. I should have just done them on my phone because it's so much more intuitive. And I'm like, I could have got the light better if I just used Snapseed. So there's something about how intuitive it is to use, and the way you use your fingertips to work, which is a bit like going back to finger painting, isn't it? As children, we were able to use our hands and our fingers to manipulate things long before we learned to use pens and styluses and mice and mouses and all those things. So yeah. I really I feel like it seamlessly integrates with my photography process.
Yeah. So your background, you come from a long time photography background. Mm-hmm. You started as a child, I guess, if I remember correctly from your interview with Mike James. You went into the dark room and you have experience with that. Mm-hmm. Do you ever incorporate any of your darkroom techniques with the digital stuff, like dodge and burn? I mean, obviously you've probably done dodging and burning and that, but do you find there's any kind of overlap there, or like a resemblance in your technique with between the old darkroom style and the digital darkroom?
Very much so. So behind me, where I'm pointing to now, I've still got my two dark rooms, which I work in every week. I still make a lot of work in my color dark rooms, actually. And I do have a similar workflow. Obviously, when I'm shooting on film, I tend to be a lot more careful and try and get everything right in camera. So I wouldn't be doing basic adjustments like I tend to with my phone, like horizon straightening and cropping. I'll do most of that stuff in camera. But when it gets down to the things like, as you said, dodging and burning, that's very much a skill that I've brought over from my darkroom. And actually I do that in very, very minute detail. It's one of the things I spend a lot of time doing in Snapseed to increase the appearance of contrast and sharpness in my images. I'll quite often paint things in by hand in a dodging and burning technique. And also I use it a lot in the same way that I would color grade in my darkroom. I tend to color grade. It's a thought process that I always think about as well in my digital. So I think having come from a darkroom background gives you a very important grounding in how photography works. But actually, even if you've never shot anything except on a phone, you can still understand the need for what the picture in front of you has. If you kind of look at it and think the color's a bit off, or this is a bit not right, you kind of can see what in your assessment what needs fixing. And so it's always on a bit of a case-by-case basis, but there are definite similarities between my work processes in the two places.
Yeah, I mean, if Ansel Adams was only alive today to play around with this stuff, can you imagine what he would do? But saying that, I have a feeling he probably would not be so inclined to use the digital stuff. He would probably stay with the traditional darkroom equipment and just work his magic like he always did. But
Mm.
so with all the teaching that you do, like you have some courses and you do workshops. Um, is there anything that you're still learning about photography? Like, I know you can always learn about, your students and their methods or whatever, but is there anything that you're still learning about photography while you're doing all this
I
teaching and
think that
instructing?
I think the thing that I find where I learn the most actually is I do on Mondays and Fridays I work at Falmouth University and I work on the BA photography, which is a specialism in marine and natural history photography. And I think the thing that's working with those students has taught me and that I keep learning about is storytelling and communication, and the kind of ideas, not so much about the the physical aspects of the technicalities of photography, but more about the kind of the aesthetic and the way it changes. So I think that each generation brings something new to the table, and that's the place where there's always plenty of room to learn. And so for me, spending time with my third year BA photography students is absolutely brilliant to see their interpretations of the way they discuss things like environmental issues and wildlife, and the way they integrate photography and filmmaking as well is really, really interesting, and something that I guess you can do more with when you've got something like an iPhone to hand, where you can switch so seamlessly between the two things. And obviously places like Instagram encourage you to kind of storytell on multiple platforms, so you'd be doing some of it in reels and some of it as stills photos and mixing things up together. And so I think that kind of aspect of the way we use media, photographic media, for communication is probably the area where I'm still learning the most. But occasionally I'll learn new bits about things like the way the way the style of editing is alters over time as well. Like, everybody's a bit guilty when we first started editing with phone apps. Everybody over edited everything hideously, and everybody made
Yeah.
all your HDR was just this thing that was just everywhere, and no photo looked normal because the world looked like HDR because of all the photos taken in that style. So I think, as you spend time with these apps and you kind of learn how to make your pictures look natural again, and how to bring everything back, and to remember to not overcook things and keep everything simple. That's something that I noticed the younger generations of photographers that I work with are very keen to have images that don't look processed and edited at all, and they want things to look very kind of cutting edge and fresh. And so that's something else. I think there's a lot to learn from working with multiple generations and their photography. And then I sometimes teach workshops with people, octogenarians who've got 40-50 years of photographic experience behind them, and I still learn plenty about the way they approach their photography, and from that generation as well. So I'm very lucky to be able to teach people across the board, children as young as 7. They bring so much joy to it. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So let's take a few minutes here to look at some of your photos. I'll do a screen share here so you and everyone else can see what we're talking about. So I've selected 3 out of the bunch that you've sent me to look at, and the rest will be going as a slideshow throughout the video as we're chatting here. This one here I thought was very interesting. It looks like there's so many layers to it. Can you tell us what you've done with this one, or tell us a little bit more about it?
So I call this one a burst and stack photograph, and it's something I really enjoy doing, which is tracking moving subjects with my iPhone on burst mode and just photographing them repeatedly as they move across the scene, and then using the double exposure tool inside of Snapseed to keep overlaying multiple layers onto the image. And then sometimes once I've created 2 or 3 exposures, I'll flatten that into one image and put it back into the double exposure tool and layer a few more on, and then double it up again. So what I'm basically doing is capturing all the movement, in this case of this young woman on her skateboard. So this is about 15 frames, and you can see all the buildings that she's gone past and all the different benches in the park.
Wow. Yeah.
You see a monument in the foreground, but the focus is just on her. So just making sure I keep her the thing that's focused on all the time gives these really unusual ways of just, I don't know, doing something different with the phone. I think it's really good fun to explore and kind of make images that don't look as you'd expect.
Yeah, it's such an interesting concept, and you know, just to be able to think of doing something like this is mind blowing to me. You know, what I really see about this is that the eye is drawn to the woman on the skateboard. That's a given, but yet you're still exploring everything in the photo because there is so much there to see, even though, you know, they're I would look at them as thin layers. But you can, there's so much to pick out of it. Like, you know, like you say, the monument, the different benches, there's people on the benches, you know, the buildings in the background, the tree, the branches, this photo could keep you busy for quite some time, you know, just exploring it with your eyes. Now, was there any other processing done, like, you know, color, contrast, all that stuff to this one?
Yeah, so I've changed the color on it as well. I think by the time I'd overlaid all of them, there's a tendency with phone's algorithms to always make the grass look really acidy green. And I find that when you start stacking images on top of each other, the greens can end up looking so bright and so overwhelming that they distract from everything else in the picture. So I always just go through with the curves tool and bring the greens down, and then you know, mask out the rest of the picture. So in this case, I've kind of played with the green tone a little bit and just reduced it. So because the girl in the picture's got very fair skin, and I wanted her turquoise dress to be the thing that drew the eye more, and I thought it stood out quite nicely against the brown bench in the background. So I enhanced the warmth of the picture, which took some of the brightness out of the green, but also added lovely warmth to the bench and her hair, and all that lovely sandstone, all the old sandstone buildings of Bristol in the UK that are in the background, just to encourage that. And I think as well, when I'm overlaying them, I don't always overlay all of the image. I'll mask areas out. So in this case, I've masked a bit of the face out on some of the other images so that you don't get too many faces. So I chose one face, but let her hair and body appear more times. So you kind of mask out. Each layer is like a thin layer of varnish, and you let some bits stay and take some bits out if they're distracting. For example, that big tree could have become too dominant, so you kind of just rub a bit out in each layer. This image is actually taken from my third book, which will be out in August, and that's a book that's about 52 inspirational ideas to take your smartphone photography to the next level, basically. And it's just an ideas book, one for every week of the year, that just push you further. And this process is described step by step in that new book.
That sounds like a book I will be getting.
I hope so. There you go. One sale already.
Yep, for sure. Because I find I need that inspiration, and you know, sometimes I need those ideas planted in my head. And so, just one last quick question on this one: was the warming that you did, was it a global adjustment, or did you pick and choose the areas that you were going to warm up?
I did do it as a global adjustment, but then I masked it out in certain places. So I just went through the places where there were blue or turquoise hues within the picture. So in the sky and within some of the buildings, there were windows that were reflecting blue light back. I just masked those out on the global adjustment on that layer. I just masked out the areas where the blue were, so that those bits didn't change color too much. But apart from that, it's kind of affected the whole image. And it gave it, even though it was a lovely sunny day, it just kind of warmed everything up a bit more.
Yeah, well,
I think on the subject of color adjustment, it's a really nice way of giving unity to a whole image. And it's often important to think about the entire image and not just the subject matter. And so sometimes that in itself, just adding a global color adjustment at the end, but then masking it, you know, perhaps not having it as dense in some areas as others, just using your masking tool within the layer on a Snapseed, for example, is a way of kind of giving the whole thing an overall polish, which ties everything in really nicely and kind of gives a better aesthetic, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just an amazing image. I just can't stop looking at it, but we'll have to go on to another one. Now, as you know, I am a macro fanatic, and that's why this one caught my eye. So let's talk about this one. Is it a macro shot, or is it just a close-up?
Well, actually, it's free lensing. Have you heard of freelancing before?
Freelancing? No, I haven't.
So this is another one. Of all the pictures I sent you from across my career so far, you've picked 2 out of my book that comes out in August. So that's quite fun, because it gives me the opportunity to talk about images that have not been seen in public before. This is the first time either of these 2 images have ever been shown to anyone except my publisher. So this again comes from 52 interesting things you might not have thought you could do with your phone. And what I've done here is gone around and collected lots of old macro lenses that you can buy in, you know, like dollar stores and service stations, gas stations and places like that. You can sometimes buy these really cheap bits of kit to stick on your smartphones. I also go through junk shops and thrift stores and charity shops and collect. Whenever I see old lens glass, I always buy old lenses, even if I don't have the camera that they fit to. And what you can do is you can hold those lenses up against your smartphone lens and basically create images that are kind of like that kind of like extension tubes. So you can focus through the lens that you've added, and then focus through that lens on with your phone, and it gives you these wonderful blurry bokeh backgrounds that you wouldn't normally get, but also gives you the opportunity to get extremely close to subjects in a way that you wouldn't normally with your phone. So I had great fun exploring free lensing, and there's obviously different combinations. So my book describes in great detail and shows loads of examples of free lensing where you're using a telephoto lens and a wide angle lens held in front of it. And what you're doing is you're just holding it with your hands. So you don't want it pressed up against your phone too closely. You want it to be kind of loose and give you a bit of strange lens distortion and light leaks and all these things, because it adds a sort of an atmosphere and drama. And another, again, just trying to find ways to make photos with phones that don't necessarily scream, I took this with my phone. The algorithm did half the work for me. It's a little bit about, you know, putting the creativity back into smartphone photography, and in that way freeing people up to be artists and creators.
That is a wonderful idea. I never would have thought to hold up an SLR lens in front of my phone to see what would happen.
Now you do.
So do you find the focusing was hard to achieve at all, or was it rather easy?
Sometimes it was. I mean, the phone will do all the work for you. It will try and focus through. So what I would do was lock focus once it had found it. So it might hunt sometimes a little bit. So I'd lock focus. It would be more useful to me if I kind of found, I would either tie the lens that I was holding, the free lens, to a tripod, or I might have the lens free but put my phone on a tripod, and that meant that something was stable in the equation. Because I'm sure, as you're probably familiar with macro photography, if there's too many things moving when you're looking through lenses like that, it can make you really nauseous and car sick, or give you sort of motion sickness, can't it?
Yeah.
So, and that can be quite headache inducing quite quickly. So part of this is to not worry too much if nothing is sharp or everything's sharp, because it's more about kind of going with a feeling and something unusual. But yeah, by having one thing stable and then locking focus, you can kind of move the other thing around, whether it be your phone to reframe or move the lens around. And in the book, I describe really carefully how you can figure out which lens is the best lens to work with when you bring, you know, of your camera lenses, when you bring a lens into the equation, and kind of talked about the differences between using a 50mm DSLR lens and a macro lens that you've got out of a kit for your smartphone.
Would you shoot with burst mode?
You can shoot with burst mode. I found with burst mode it was harder to get focus for most of them, so I was more inclined to do it almost going back to like kind of old school film photography, where you'd spend your time getting the shot right and finding everything as you wanted it, and then pressing the shutter a couple of times. So a lot of these exercises in this book are about slowing the creative process down and making you think more about the images you make. And in doing so, you get this joy of crafting and making images rather than just snatching them out of the ether and being a snap happy kind of photographer. This is about, this whole book is about encouraging people to just think more about their process and the way they create and craft their imagery.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a brilliant idea to try this freelancing. Now I wish I'd have kept a lens or two from my DSLR kit, but I sold
Just
it
get
all
your-
off in
Just get yourself
2016.
down to a thrift store. The dirtier and dustier and more scratched the lenses, the more effective it'll be. So yeah, just every time you go past anywhere now that sells junk like that, get inside and pick everything up that you can.
Yeah, definitely will. I'll start looking. This is cool. So this one here, I have seen this one before. This isn't a spoiler alert for the book or anything.
No.
This was when you were in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe I saw this on an interview you did with one of the local TV stations there.
I did.
Yeah.
So this is the one where everyone, this is the first time I ever took an image where everyone went, you did not take that on a phone.
And that seems to be a more common thing nowadays. Like people are starting to realize that these phones are really good. And you know, I think a lot of people nowadays are saying, yeah, I could see that being a phone. But I mean, when you took this, how long ago would this have been?
This was 2015.
Okay.
No, sorry, early 2016. And yes, at the time, I didn't know anyone that was kind of doing this sort of photography. So there was slow shutter cam. The app was available to use, and I was just experimenting with a lot. I did a lot of photography before I kind of hit on something that worked for me. And these kind of scenes where with this kind of low light and the Manhattan skyline with all the lights, it was just so much more effective than the standard waterfall shots that everybody was doing at the time. It just kind of expanded it out into something else. And I was so proud of this. I really wanted this to be the cover of my first book, but the publisher had their heart set on one of my pictures of the national park where I live. So that won the day. But for me, this always should have been the cover of my book. I was so proud of this when I took it. Yeah,
it's a great image. So as far as editing goes, did you have to do too much? Because I know slow shutter cam does a great job itself. You know, it can produce great images without too much work needed to be done.
Yeah, all I did here was just increase the contrast ever so slightly because of the time of night, the blacks looked a little bit flat. There wasn't a full black in there. So I basically just brought the blacks up ever so slightly using the curves tool. And it was a minimal amount, you know, like 1 or 2 degrees really. And that was it. I didn't have to change the color. It's literally exactly as it came out of the camera. And one of the things I love about working like this with slow shutter cam or any of those stacking apps is that you can obviously blow these pictures up huge and there's no issues with noise and the shadows because of the stacking action of all those photos being laid one on top of the other to create this effect of a slow shutter speed basically means that everything random is removed from each picture, and because noise is completely random from one frame to the next, it means that all the noise is removed and you can blow these pictures up. I blew one up, you know, like over 1 meter in size at the photography show a few years back, and I had 300 people in the audience and said, come over and look at this enormous print and do some pixel peeping, and no one could find any problems with the quality of it, even when it was blown up really big. So that's another big turning point for smartphone photography, is being able to exhibit these works at a large scale and still not have people look at it and go, well, that's clearly shot on a phone. So yeah, stacking is one of the many ways that you can improve the quality vastly when you work with them. So.
And did you have a tripod with you for this one, or did you have to set it on a railing or anything? Or
I just used one of those the Joby pod, you know, the Joby Gorilla pods with the little bendy legs. I just always have one of those sort of stuck in in the back of my backpack, and all I did was get that out and stick it on a rock, which is why it's on quite a low perspective here, but I kind of wanted it to be quite close to the water anyway, so that there was lots of sky being bounced back and forth between the water, and you know, it gives that kind of nice light area in the foreground as well as at the back. So yeah, just literally just the Gorilla Pod, and they come with a professional tripod head that's got it's a Pro Grip it's called, and I've used that for years. It's just really useful and holds onto my phone really successfully and doesn't let it fall into anything, although obviously now that they're waterproof it's less of an issue than it used to be, but back then I would have been terrified of losing it. But yeah, it's this was I think I was in New York for 10 days just walking up and down the streets on my own. I went out there with my phone specifically to shoot all the images for the book. And each day I would start where I'd finished the day before and just crisscross back and forth across Manhattan. I did the whole neighborhood. And at one point I got to the point where I could basically jump on the ferry down near Wall Street and come over to Dumbo and look back at Manhattan and get these photos and grab some pizza and then get back on the ferry and go back again. But I look back at that time of just the freedom of walking around with my phone. None of my children were with me. I was literally out there on my own, no big camera kit for the first time in my life. And it was an absolute revelation to have this freedom to take photos in a completely different way to any way that I'd ever traveled and taken pictures before. It was brilliant. So immediate.
So do you have a favorite photo that you've ever taken?
The one that's on my cover of Smart Photo Editing, which is my second book, the one that came out in September, which I happen to have here.
Oh, okay, yep.
Possibly one of my all-time favorite photos. I've got many. They're all like my babies and it's hard to choose. But what I love about that photo is I didn't know that the bird was going to appear when I was taking a picture of the light. And I kind of spent my time setting up the shot and playing with the framing. And then I noticed a bird in the distance and thought, I'll put it on burst mode and see what happens. And left burst mode on for about 200 photos and was very lucky to be able to get this bird fly across. Right. This is actually taken where I'm sitting now at my desk. I'm looking out of the window of my studio, and this is just taken from my studio window through the glass. And I think maybe that's why it's my favorite, because this is the view I look at every day and I'm proud of that picture. It's lovely to be able to look out of my window and see that view all the time. And I'm glad to have finally captured it just the one time. That's the picture that sums up years of pleasure of looking out of that window.
Yeah, I love the story behind the image too, that, with what you had to do with the editing process. Not that there was a whole lot as far as, color, contrast, that sort of thing, but eliminating the poop.
Yeah. Yeah, ponies. That's the problem about where I live on the moor. There are wild Dartmoor ponies all over the place and they leave mess everywhere. So every landscape is always slightly marred by these brown blobs all over the place. So I always have to take them away.
Yeah. Now I would have selected that picture to show, but I watched your interview with Mike James and you talked about it there. So I'll have a link to your interviews with Andy and Mike, so that people can go and look at them and listen to the story behind that photo, folks. It's really interesting, especially the editing process. It kind of made me chuckle a little bit, but yeah, I mean, I don't blame you for doing it that way for sure. So, okay, how did you get the idea of doing a book about Snapseed? We talked about how you got interested in Snapseed, but writing a book about it, like, was it just the fact that you just wanted to share that with the world, or what was the thought process behind that?
So I always thought that I had one book in me, and that was the smart photography book. And I felt like once that was done, the publisher said, should we do another one? It's been a bestseller. You must have another one. You can't walk away. And I was like, I haven't got anything else. I promised that was it. That was my one book. And I kind of walked away from it thinking I couldn't do any more. And then I started working with the Royal Photographic Society, making, I do full day workshops where I kind of do the content of my first book, Smart Photography, as a full day workshop with students, and they kind of do bits out of the book and then they do practical exercises. And everyone kept saying, how come there's only 3 pages in the back where you talk about editing your photos? Why aren't there more case studies? And so over time, the Royal Photographic Society basically bent my arm repeatedly to develop an editing workshop that went hand in hand with my photography one, because the demand was there. And after a couple of years of delivering that workshop and it being a bestseller, that one, it sells out faster than they can list it. And so I kind of run it once every 2 months now. I don't want to do it more often than that. But every time it goes on, there's like a waiting list. And so when lockdown started, my publisher said, you've got less work to do now. It's a bit of a quiet time. Have you thought about anything else you might like to do as a book? And I just thought, I could, as my first book was a photography textbook, I could maybe do the textbook that goes as its companion, the editing one. And because I always taught the first workshop on Snapseed, because it means everyone can use it, doesn't matter what device you're using or what tablet you're using, everyone can access Snapseed. And I like that kind of democratization of the software. You don't have to have money or expensive fancy kit to use Snapseed. Everybody can do it, and I'm not leaving anyone out. And that's what I kind of felt like if I was going to do a thing on software, although I use lots of different software apps and programs, that was the one that felt like it would have the most reach and be able to give the most people an opportunity to make change. But also I think once I started just writing down what my workshop was and taking all my workshop notes and looking at it, I realized that it did actually make quite a good book. And it's a very different book to all the other books I've done, because there's a lot of screenshots and kind of step-by-step instructions in a way that's much less creative than anything else I've done. But everyone who comes on my workshops always has a copy of that book, and they always love kind of following along, and the two kind of go hand in hand. And I'm really glad I made it. I'm proud of that book, because it completes the circle that started with my showing you how to take photos with your phone. It felt like it was wrong to just not really spend as much time on the editing. And I always thought if Ansel Adams could write a book on the negative and the camera and the print, then I could probably get my second book out and kind of go there. You know, you don't have a negative these days, but negative and print combined these days would be something like, you know, what Snapseed can do. I was also very wary about making a book with software in it, because software changes so rapidly. But actually, on the whole, Snapseed is pretty stable. It doesn't have loads of changes all the time, because it's already so well thought out, and the things it does so brilliantly that I wasn't worried that a year down the line it would be irrelevant. Because by writing the book as a workflow as well, it kind of the book is it does show you all the steps of how to do things, and how like a professional photographer might, you know, approach editing a photo. So there's that whole aspect of it, as well as the technical, this is how you actually do it. And what I find a lot of people come to me asking is, what's the best workflow, or how should I, you know, where do I start and what steps do I take? And so it was nice to be able to put that all down in a book as well.
Yeah, that's something that it really, you have to be careful about when you're writing a book about this stuff, is because the technology changes so much, like even phone to phone, right? Like year over year, whether it's an Android phone or an iPhone. And but Snapseed, like you say, they've done a great job at keeping their app consistent over the years. And I think it's probably the most popular editing app for phones, because it's free. It has so much stuff in it. You can use it quite simply, or you can deep dive into it. And, you know, it's just a wonderful tool. So let's see here. Well, I think that was all the questions I have about the you know, life and career of Joe Bradford. But so, okay. So when did this latest book come out then?
So the smart photo editing book came out in December in Europe and January around the rest of the world. And it's been doing quite well, actually. The sales are still consistent on the first book, and now that one's slotted in next to it. So in the UK, they're both still regularly inside the top 10 bestsellers in the digital photography category, which makes me really proud that, you know, the smartphone community is represented in the wider digital photography world. And that will be the thing that I'll always get to, you know, be proud of, is that mine was the first bestseller in the digital photography category that literally just talked about phones. They can't take that away from me. That's mine. I'm keeping it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so that one came out in December, but I kind of wrote the book that we've talked about today, the next one, which is called Smart Photo 52 Ideas, you know, that I told you about, the 52 ideas to kind of make your photography more creative and just, you know, ideas to do something different with your phone. That one I wrote for a different publisher, almost back to back, and that one is actually due for release in August all over the world. So I'm very excited about that one, and that's being translated into other languages as well. And you know,
nice.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm very much looking forward to seeing all the work people make with all the ideas I've given them in the third book. So that's already available to pre-order on Amazon and in all the bookstores already, even though it's not out.
Oh, really?
So that's, quite exciting.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the first two, and you know, the best of luck on the next one. You know, congratulations on basically your career, because you've really exploded in the you know, in the smartphone space with the you know, workshops and all that stuff. I mean, everything that you've done, it's almost like everything you touch turns to gold. and that's
a
good
lot of
thing.
hard work. A lot of hard
Yeah.
work and sleepless nights, but I feel like for years it didn't feel like whether it was a brilliant idea to stick so hard to the smartphone photography, but I really believed that it would have its moments. And now I'm really glad that I kind of put those years of work in at the beginning, and I'll never regret making that first book, because I've met so many wonderful people like yourself through this community. And you know, it's just a great opportunity to connect with people on a different level that isn't about how expensive is your kit and how big is your lens and you know, how long have you been in photography? None of that stuff matters in the smartphone community. We're a different breed of photographer, and I feel like it's completely democratized the way image making is undertaken, and it's changed the way people access photography, both as a viewer and as a creator. And I think for all those reasons, we're very lucky to live in a time where we have access to such simple image making skills and techniques and kit. We're very lucky.
Yeah, I've talked about the community aspect of smartphone photography a few different times on my show, and you know, it's the best group of people that I could ever imagine being involved with. You know, there's never any trash talking and all that stuff. You know, it's just everybody's so kind and just wonderful to communicate with, and I would just love to see a massive conference somewhere in the world that everybody could attend. It would be so much fun. But well, thank you, Joe, for talking today. It's been absolutely wonderful, and a complete pleasure to hear your story and all that stuff. And I thought when the next one comes out, we'll have to have you back.
I would love to come back and tell you a few more stories there's 52 to pick from that book, so I think I can tell you a few more. It'll be brilliant. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. I've had a great time. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you for sharing your audience with me today. It's very lovely.
Well, I think this video on the YouTube channel is going to be a hit.
Thank you.
So tell everybody where they could find you then.
So you can find me on Instagram at Green Island Studios, and you can find my books in bookstores all over the world. So you can walk into bookshops on the street and you can buy them on online, and you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Green Island Art on Twitter, and on Green Island Studios on Facebook, and I've got a website which is greenislandstudios.co.uk. And I would like to say to everybody, if you're out there taking smartphone photography pictures, I want to see them. I'm putting together a project at the moment where I'm looking at what the best people in the world doing smartphone photography are doing, and I'm really, really interested to hear from people if they're out there using their smartphones and recording their daily lives. And so if you are, and you're on Instagram or Facebook or anything, please tag me in your posts so I can have a look at what you're all doing. Oh,
very cool. So we'll have links to all those places in the show notes where everybody can just snap and find you. And you know, again, thanks for the time and the wonderful chat, and we'll definitely get you on when the next one comes out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for having me.
And that was the interview with Joe Bradford. I hope you enjoyed it. And you know, she's a great gal, so super busy. She's got an assistant. She's that busy. And what can I say? I'm looking forward to this book she has coming out in the future here. I'm not sure when it's coming out. I did that interview about a week and a half ago. So if it was in the interview, my mush of a melon can't remember what she said. But anyway, well, Dave, we'll call it a day at that. And
sounds good.
Tell everybody where they could find you.
Sure, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter as ProfPod, and find me on TikTok as ProfPodPGH.
All righty, and those are all in the show notes. And you can find me on Instagram at Macmillan Photo, Twitter Macmillan_photo, and I guess all my other links you can find at about.me/Macmillan. So thanks everybody for joining us, and hope you enjoyed this video version for a change. And this is when we'll do the videos, when we have like an interview or something like that to show, and be a little more interesting, I think, than you know, just two talking heads. So thanks again, Dave. Good talk, and we'll see you all on the next one.
Have a great one, everyone.